What if the final pages of the Bible weren't written just for ancient believers, but as a warning encoded for a future civilization that looks uncomfortably like ours? The book of Revelation closes the Christian canon with images so strange they've haunted readers for nearly 2,000 years. Cities falling in a single hour. A global system no one can opt out of. Signs in the sky that terrify entire populations. For centuries, these visions felt distant, symbolic, almost mythological. But today, with planetary communication networks, algorithmic governance, and fragile global supply chains, those ancient descriptions feel less like fantasy and more like a mirror tilted toward the present. The question is no longer whether these passages are dramatic. The question is whether they were describing a pattern humanity repeats, and whether we are standing inside one of those cycles right now. To understand why this matters, we have to step back into the world that produced these texts. Revelation emerged during a period of imperial dominance, political anxiety, and rapid cultural change. People felt watched, categorized, and controlled by systems far larger than themselves. Sound familiar? The author used symbolic language because direct criticism could be dangerous. Beasts represented empires. Marks symbolized loyalty systems. Collapsing cities reflected economic fragility. This wasn't just prophecy in the fortune-telling sense. It was pattern recognition, a coded analysis of how power consolidates, how societies drift, and how human fear can be organized at scale. The reason this still resonates is simple. The structures it warned about never truly disappeared. They evolved. One of the most debated symbols is the idea of a universal mark tied to buying and selling. Stripped of mysticism, the passage describes an economic filter participation in daily life, mediated by an external system of authorization. In the ancient world, this echoed imperial seals and loyalty tokens, but the underlying pattern is broader. Every era invents mechanisms that decide who is in and who is out. Identification systems, currency controls, digital access layers. The prophecy doesn't name a technology. It describes a condition, economic dependency woven into identity itself. That's why the image persists. It's not about a gadget. It's about the fusion of power, commerce, and personal autonomy. A fusion that has appeared repeatedly throughout history. Another recurring theme is sudden collapse. Revelation speaks of great structures falling in what feels like a single moment. Historians recognize this rhythm. Complex systems rarely crumble slowly in public view. They appear stable until cascading failures expose hidden weaknesses. We've seen versions of this in financial crises, empires stretched thin, and infrastructures that seemed permanent right up until they weren't. The text captures a psychological truth. Civilizations assume continuity. The warning is not that collapse is guaranteed. It's that complexity creates fragility, and fragility hides behind confidence. The prophecy dramatizes a lesson. Historians keep rediscovering stability is often an illusion maintained by momentum. Then there are the cosmic signs. Stars falling, skies darkening, earth trembling. Ancient readers interpreted these as divine intervention. Modern readers might see metaphor layered onto natural phenomena, solar events, climate instability, or even the psychological shock of living through unprecedented change. Symbolic language compresses emotional experience into vivid imagery. When societies feel overwhelmed, it can feel like the sky itself is shifting. The prophecy encodes that sensation, the human response to upheaval. It reminds us that fear isn't just about events. It's about perception, scale, and our sense of control slipping. Now, consider the modern parallels. We live in the first era where human systems operate at planetary speed. Financial markets react in milliseconds. Information spreads globally before facts stabilize. Supply chains bind continents together so tightly that disruption in one region ripples everywhere. At the same time, identification, surveillance, and access systems increasingly mediate participation in society. None of this proves prophecy is being fulfilled in a literal sense, but it does reveal why the imagery feels current. The ancient author described the emotional architecture of systemic power centralization, dependency, fragility, spectacle dynamics that intensify as societies scale. Here's where the hidden pattern emerges. Revelation isn't just predicting events. It's mapping a cycle. Systems consolidate. Prosperity grows. Complexity increases. Dependency deepens. Confidence peaks. Then stress exposes fractures. People search for meaning inside chaos. New orders rise from the debris. This loop appears across empires, economies, and technological revolutions. The prophecy dramatizes the cycle to force a question. Will humanity recognize the pattern, or repeat it blindly? The end described may not be a single apocalyptic moment. It may be the recurring endpoint of unsustainable structures, a reset embedded in human history. The most unsettling element isn't the imagery of beasts or falling stars. It's the moral dimension. Revelation constantly contrasts allegiance, not just to rulers, but to balus. It asks whether people surrender judgment for security, convenience, or belonging. That tension is timeless. Every generation negotiates the boundary between collective order and individual conscience. The prophecy suggests that when systems grow powerful enough, the real crisis isn't technological. It's ethical. Who decides what participation costs? What compromises become normalized? And at what point does survival drift into submission? So what is the warning hidden in those final pages? It may be less about predicting a date and more about diagnosing a trajectory. When societies centralize power, merge identity with economics, and assume permanence, they enter a familiar danger zone. The text uses cosmic drama to make that danger impossible to ignore. It tells readers, watch the patterns, not just the symbols. Pay attention to how systems shape behavior. Notice when fear becomes leverage. The prophecy survives because it doesn't age. It describes pressures that return whenever human ambition outruns wisdom. This doesn't demand panic. It demands awareness. Revelation closes with imagery of renewal, a reminder that endings and beginnings often share the same doorway. Historically, periods of disruption have also produced reform, innovation, and cultural rebirth. The warning is paired with responsibility. If cycles repeat, recognition becomes power. Societies that understand their vulnerabilities can redesign them. Individuals who see how systems influence choices can navigate them with intention. The prophecy isn't only a forecast, it's an invitation to examine the machinery shaping our future. And that leads to the final reflection. If ancient writers encoded a pattern of rise, dependency, and reckoning, where exactly are we standing inside that arc? Are we early in consolidation, at the peak of confidence, or approaching the stress points history always delivers? The answer isn't written in headlines. It's written in the structure beneath them. The final pages of the Bible don't hand us a schedule. They hand us a lens, one that reveals how power behaves when it believes it's permanent, and how humans respond when permanence proves fragile. The last line of Revelation isn't a scream of destruction. It's a closing signal, a reminder that awareness is itself a form of preparation. Patterns repeat. Systems evolve. Warnings echo across centuries. The question has never been whether the signs exist. The question is whether we're willing to read them before the cycle completes. This transmission isn't about fear. It's about recognition. And recognition, once seen, can't be unseen.